Hey everyone, welcome to the 253rd episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have an astonishing show for you today. Actually, it's a little bit depressing. We're going to be talking about Ring, an effort to halt facial recognition tech, smart cities, security rules for connected devices in the UK, some security weaknesses in LoRaWAN. We've got some HomeKit news. We've got some news from Cisco about a new security offering. We've got a new satellite offering. And Verizon's teaming up with Honeywell, so we're going to talk about that. And we may or may not talk about another smart ring. Oh, so much. Plus, we're going to hear from our sponsor, Machine Q. And our guest this week is Dan Breidelman of KB Home. And we're going to be talking about what changes in the home when we have connected technology. All of this and more await you after a message from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is IoT World. IoT World is the intersection of industries and IoT technologies. It'll be held April 6th through 9th at the San Jose Convention Center in Silicon Valley. And it's celebrating its 7th anniversary. IoT World is going to welcome over 12,500 IoT professionals, 400 speakers, and 400 exhibitors and startups. You're going to be able to connect with strategists, technologists, and implementers to put IoT, AI, 5G, and Edge into action across key industry verticals. Headline speakers are going to be from Facebook, Caterpillar, ABB, Uber, and more. Y'all, you can save 25% with VIP code STACEY25. That's STACEY 25. I encourage you to use it. That way people will know that we sent you. So if you attend, please use the code. And if you would like to learn more and register to attend, visit iotworldevent.com. Okay, Kevin. I shouldn't sound so cheerful.
No. This is a ring we are going to talk about.
We're not sure if we're going to talk about the activity tracking ring, but this ring, the doorbell company. Two pieces of news, sort of related. I have some conflicting feelings, but let's talk about what happened this week in Ring news. And the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they looked at tracking software in the Ring app on Android phones, and they discovered that there are a couple companies that are in there that Ring never discloses. They also were just kind of like, holy cow, the type of information that Ring can get about a person on their device from the app and then shares that information is really problematic, because what they're doing is they're tying an account number or an email address to a device type and doing a fingerprint for that device type, and then also sharing sensor data. And what the EFF is concerned about is that someone could recreate someone's real identity based on that information. So, couple things to know about this. One, feel like some of this is overblown. And the reason I say that is because some of the apps that they share the data with, like Crashlytics, Mixpanel, Branch.io, a lot of these are actually services that help you track clicks across platforms. So they let you track like people who click on links. Like if I'm in the Ring app and I go to the support page because I'm having trouble with something, the Branch.io service tracks and makes sure I get to the right place. And it also says, hey, this is how I got there. It doesn't actually have to be nefarious.
Right. The Crashlytics one that was mentioned, I don't even think that should have been mentioned, because that is a way it's a Google tool. And again, we're talking about Android software in this particular case. It's crash logging information for the developer. That's pretty standard fare on just about, I'd say, any app. So I don't know why that was mentioned in this article.
Yeah, and they have like Apps Flyers in here. Apps Flyer does the same sort of thing as Branch. And then Facebook. That's the other big thing that people are like, oh my gosh, even if I don't have a Facebook account, it's tracking and giving my information to Facebook. And this, I have a harder time with because one, I don't trust Facebook, but two, I don't really understand why that information is going to Facebook. And I don't know if you have any insights there, Kevin.
No, unless at some one point in time there was a way to sign in to Ring using a Facebook account for authorization.
Oh, that could be. And
it could be.
Yeah. And there is an issue. Like, people don't always clean up their code. Not that that's an excuse. It's just
true. But even the specific data, we only have one screenshot of data delivered to graph.facebook.com. I'm looking at some of the attributes that it does deliver, the types of data that is advertiser ID, advertiser tracking enabled, which in this case was true, bunch of information such as the phone model, the screen resolution, the time zone where the person lives. So yeah, even if it was an OAuth or not an OAuth, but an authorization method, I don't think that data is needed.
No. In some ways, I applaud the EFF for taking Ring and doing this deep dive on this, because I know this is very common. A lot of apps use a lot of these services. A lot of websites use a lot of these services. Some of them are more insidious than others. Like, we use various logging things on our site. We use it for bug detection. We don't actually provide data that we sell to marketers or anything like that. But we do have services that are a third party that track back and grab device information, so the site renders properly on all mobile devices. And when it doesn't, we'll know. It actually makes me wonder. I'm like, oh man, what are those people doing with the data my site sends them? It's a relatively small site, but now I'm like, is it possible to do this cleanly?
But your point is well taken. It's pretty common and not necessarily nefarious.
But it could be.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, it could be. And that gets into, and I'm wondering if this is why you have an issue with what the EFF has done here. Why just call out Ring? Did you all check, would be my question to them, did you all check the other similar doorbell apps?
Or similar smart home apps. And so Ring is already in the hot seat, and it's very easy. Ha-ha, Ring, take it down, take them out. But it's also, they're not alone in this, and that doesn't make it okay. And the question then becomes, can you really opt out of this sort of, I don't want to say surveillance, but this sort of tracking and logging? And the answer is not really on the web very easily. As an individual, you could probably do things like, run through Tor and try to hide your device ID behind random apps. But for the most part, it's kind of a function for how the web is built. And part of it is practical, like you need to know what someone has so you can deliver the right service to that device. And part of it is based on this idea of we will aggregate all data and sell it for marketing purposes.
Correct. And that should all be spelled out in the terms of service on any of these devices. And to answer your question, is there any easy way to get out of it? Well, don't accept the terms of service and therefore don't use these products. I mean, that's an extreme method, but I think it's the only method that is foolproof.
Right now, yes. Okay, related to this is another splashy headline about Ring, which is about an Amazon software engineer who basically called out in a post on Medium as part of the Amazon Employees for Climate Justice. He decided instead of talking about climate justice, he really wanted to talk about Ring. And he says, quote, "The deployment of connected home security cameras that allow footage to be queried centrally are simply not compatible with a free society. The privacy issues are not fixable with regulation, and there is no balance that can be struck. Ring should be shut down immediately and not brought back."
Ouch.
And people are making a big deal. They're like, oh, Amazon engineer says, shut down Ring. It's a great headline. The issue, though, again, isn't Ring. He's talking about basically how we do a lot of connected home security these days, which is you bring all that data to the cloud. I'm not against him. That's why I liked Wise, because it has the local aspects. That's why I don't put security cameras inside my house, and I have serious questions about putting them outside my house because I don't want to be complicit in some sort of government snatch and grab operation against my neighbors. So, not that I think that would happen, but
I try and go with local storage whenever possible in terms of product choice. But even then, the SD card in my Wise camera could be, subpoenaed, I guess.
Oh, as a reporter, I always deleted my notes after 6 months. And I did that as a policy. So one thing to do is if you have local storage and like your card, just set a policy and really do it that you delete your local stuff every 2 weeks. I mean, you're going to know if something happened for the most part within a week or
Yeah.
two, right?
Yeah. No, that's good. Actually, it would be nice to see that built into the apps for these local devices or this device's local storage to say, hey, do you want me to automatically remove data after X weeks, days, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, I know I did that as a reporter, and our legal team always said, just pick something that works and do it. And if you have the set policy, it's fine, as long as you can prove that you do it.
And then there's me that has every single Gmail archived for 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oops.
It's like all that data is helpful, but it's like a ticking time bomb in some ways. Okay. Speaking of ticking time bombs, people read the New York Times story about facial recognition and freaked the heck out. I think in a good way. The Electronic Privacy Information Center, along with 40 other organizations, sent a letter to several senators. In their letter, the group of organizations urged the Privacy and Civil Liberties Board to recommend to the President and the Secretary of Homeland Security the suspension of facial recognition systems in the United States towards Americans by federal agencies. So this is it's a big ask. It's a big request. The organizations that are involved are those that you would expect. They're the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Demand Progress, the Center for Digital Democracy, Color of Change, the Algorithmic Justice League. These are civil liberties groups for the most part, but
I think it was last podcast or maybe the one before. I said, I hate to say it, but I think it's too late for that. This is happening.
So we talk a lot about China, for example, and their social score and how they're using facial recognition and all kinds of things to prevent jaywalking. Well, I was reading about the coronavirus, and one of the interesting stories was there was a gentleman who left Wuhan right before the quarantine, and he had gone home to another city in China. And I guess for some reason the authorities were interested in him, and they actually showed up at his door 2 hours later and were like, hey, you need medical attention? And I was like, holy crazy.
Here, we brought a private little bubble for you to stay in for, the foreseeable future.
There is an argument to be made in times of like an epidemic that sort of capability could be worthwhile. But there's currently no limitations on its use. There's no oversight over how accurate facial recognition is. I mean, in China, I don't know if they don't publish that data. So there's a lot of things here that I'm like,
It's all about how the data is used and what keeps those uses in check.
Yeah, like you should probably have the equivalent of like a FISA warrant to be able to like individually stalk someone.
Mm-hmm.
There should be some sort of court order to do that, I believe, because that's a pretty broad, you can do very broad search and seizure based on that. Anyway, okay. So that is halting facial recognitions. Tying this, though, to the bigger picture of smart cities. Kevin, you wrote about this week, and it was in response to a Cory Doctorow article in The Guardian last week about smart cities. What are you thinking?
It was a really good article that we'll link either in the show notes. It's also linked in the post that I wrote. Cory Doctorow, he is with the EFF, if I'm not mistaken, last I heard.
Yes. The subtext of this week's show is EFF.
EFF, yes. And basically, the article he wrote, I liked it for two reasons. One, he has a concern about smart cities, all of the kind of the security issues that we just talked about. And don't get me wrong, I love the idea and concept of smart cities, but Doctorow raises a really valid point in that smart cities can have tremendous benefits for its inhabitants, and it can do so without gathering personally identifiable information. I think the question that he posed that really, says it best is, why isn't it creepy for you to know when the next bus is due, but it is creepy for the bus company to know that you're waiting for a bus? That's a really, really good question and point that he's making. When I look at my Google Maps and my traffic, for example, that's crowdsourced information based on the sensors of all the phones in cars on the road I'm traveling. And we all get benefit from it. If there's a bunch of phones not moving, Google says, hey, it aggregates the data and says, there's a slowdown here. And that lets everybody else know. So there's a benefit. They can go a different route. But it's not telling anyone else that I'm sitting there in traffic. And that's kind of the key. So as I read this, I mean, we focus a lot on smart homes, and I thought how this is really the polar opposite of a smart home. The difference is with a smart home, I'm choosing to set up all the sensors and the cameras and the microphones. And I want the smart home to sense all that information so that it can react and set up the environment the way I want it, or turn the lights on when I want them on, etc. Basically, I've consented to that. I walk out my door, however, and I go out and about, whether it's a smart city or not, because there's cameras that are obviously not in smart cities. And that's it. I haven't signed a term of service or any other agreement. And I can be giving up a lot of personal information to I don't even know who. It's really concerning when I look at it that way. And I don't know what your thoughts are, but I just hadn't thought about the privacy aspects as much on a smart city. I've always thought about the aggregate benefits.
I've always thought of it as a potential for a surveillance state. So I love the fact, and there are ways to do this. So like having a public API for the bus company, right? Or the transit network. So people can build apps that pull that information in so I can get real-time data. That's a really good way to do that, right? That's a way to pull, you're using the bus as a sensor in that world. I do think of that, and you talked a bit about it in your post, but in some ways it reminded me of that physical web project that Google had where they use Bluetooth beacons and basically like you could show up next to something and it would be like, hi, I'm a bus stop. The next bus is coming at this time. But the worry was that with something like this, they would just do what they did on the web, which was sell it for ads. And when you start thinking about how to monetize that, it gets really gross really fast. Like, hi, I'm a bus stop. Would you like a Starbucks? Would you like this?
Yeah. It gets to be like Total Recall. If you've seen the movie where characters walking down the street and all the stores are pinging him, hi, Mr. So-and-so, we have the jacket that you like in stock now. And yeah, it gets to be that creepy factor. And see, I think this is really why Google's Nearby never took off, why beacons in general haven't taken off the way people thought they might. It's one thing to be pinged on your phone when you're nearby something of interest, but the fact that it knows you're interested in it all of a sudden, and what is it doing with that information is a whole nother story.
Yes. Okay. So we have not solved smart cities, but it's a good way to think about it. And it's a good way to ask about these services and like ponder this when your city is evaluating this or bringing it in. Speaking of, regulations and ways to evaluate things, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport worked with the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre to come up with some suggested regulations for connected products. And the goal is to create a new law. The rules associated that they really want things to follow are basically no default passwords that the company has to change, that you must have some sort of bug reporting program, and you must state the minimum length of time that the device will receive security updates at the point of sale. They say either in store or online. So that last one is an expiration date. The first two we actually have in a law associated with California has a law like this. So I think this is good. These are kind of the minimums, the minimum standards, except for this last bit where they will do an expiration date on basically security updates. So I would be interested to see like how that actually gets enforced. And I would like to see it not happening online. I don't want to see the expiration date buried in the EULA or the T&C, the terms and conditions.
I'm reading it slightly differently. When they say point of sale, either in store or online, I suspect that's online at the point of purchase. So on the website of the product page, that's
that would be
like
so amazing.
Yes. That's how I'm reading it.
I would love that. I actually have talked to people about this. Like when you put something in your Amazon cart, it says something to the effect of, hey, this will be supported for the following 2 years. Boom.
Absolutely.
It's interesting, though, because, Amazon does make money selling devices that are no longer sold or in support. So I would expect some pushback there, but that's okay.
I also expect some pushback from the device makers themselves, because if you're an up and coming small device maker, you're working on funding, perhaps you've got a plan, maybe a 5-year plan, but
that is
maybe you don't get to year 5. I'm not saying it's an excuse.
Escrow, baby.
I'm not saying it's an excuse. I'm just expecting that kind of pushback. I think it's logical to expect that.
Well, yeah, but I think having a rule and a law around it benefits everyone because it sets a minimum standard.
No argument. No, these are things that we've called for many, many times over in the past several years. I also wonder what, if anything, this does to device pricing.
Good question. We'll see.
We'll
wait and see if it happens. Okay, other news. We'll speed it up a little bit. LoRaWAN. Oh, LoRa is the low power, small data rates, long range wireless networking. A research company called IOActive basically says that, hey, the LoRaWAN protocol is prone to misconfiguration and design choices that make it easily hacked. There's a couple issues. Basically, a lot of these devices, so you can get them on the network easily, they come with like a QR code or text with the device's identifier and security keys. You're supposed to remove that tag afterwards, but most people don't. Some LoRaWAN devices come with that hard-coded encryption key that's kind of like a default password in the sense that it's in there and you can't change it no matter what. But those keys are also in open source LoRaWAN libraries, so you're not really supposed to use them. There's a lot of issues. Basically, they're saying it's really hard to configure a secure LoRaWAN network, so focus on that.
Yeah.
The idea that LoRaWAN is encrypted is true, but the way that the encryption is done, the level of encryption, and all the things that need to happen to make sure that encryption actually stays secure isn't happening. So, bad news there. Check your LoRa networks. Maybe train your security team a little bit better if you need to. We're working all this out. Okay, news bits. HomeKit. Yay, we've got some news.
We do. This is actually a follow-up from Apple's WWDC 2019 event when they said HomeKit would be supported by routers from Eero, Linksys, and Charter. It looks as though Eero and the Eero Pro routers will be the first to have HomeKit support, and that's based on a recent app update, version 3.18. It doesn't mention HomeKit support. However, the Eero routers are showing in the Home app so that you can attempt to add them to HomeKit. Doesn't work yet, so the functionality is not there, but it looks like it's coming soon. And what my take is on what this will do, and we spoke about this a couple podcasts ago about virtual private networks and firewalls, that those type of security approaches should come with that HomeKit support to bring additional security to your router. So again, Eero appears to be going to be the first one to have it. And you have Eero, so I'd be curious. Well, you don't use HomeKit, so.
Oh, I can. I've got an iPhone.
Oh, I can. I don't want to, but I can.
No. We're a mixed household, so, we don't put as much on HomeKit, but we can do it.
I hear you.
I'll check that. Mm-hmm. HomeKit is also Eve, the sensor company that only does HomeKit sensors. They are now selling their Eve WaterGuard sensor, which is a plug-in sensor that has a long tail that you can put under your sink, under your fridge, washer, water heater, whatever, and check for leaks. Related to this, because the Eve thing was announced probably a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, and now it's out. So yay on that. And I also saw a couple, 2 weeks ago, the Wirecutter put out their updates on water sensors, so their recommendations. In the HomeKit world, they recommend the Fabaro flood sensor for HomeKit. It's kind of pricey at $70, but they like it. They also like the Z-Wave version of it.
The Eve WaterGuard is $80, so.
Yeah, these are expensive. The Fabaro one doesn't plug in. So if you want one that plugs in, if you want one that there's not an outlet nearby, Fabaro. And yeah, I don't know.
And that is our water sensor segment for the day.
It's important. I mean, a lot of people call in and ask about water sensors. So I always want to, I'm like, oh, water sensor news. In industrial news, Cisco has released a new security architecture for industrial IoT. Cisco's We'll talk probably more a little bit about this in the newsletter, but basically they're letting you control it all the way from the edge to the cloud. The keywords here are it's going to work on the OT, the operational networks that run like weird old school protocols, and it's going to tie into efforts on the IT side. So when there are challenges or weaknesses in the OT stuff, it's going to pull in information and quarantine things from the IT side. Cisco is like, we are the first ever to do this, but they're not, actually. A company called Nozomi and Pulse Secure, actually in December, they paired up to offer a very similar service. Now, they are not one giant company, but they do offer that. So just want to give you a little level setting there. Satellite news, Kevin.
Satellite news. Yes, this is rather timely since SpaceX launched today and is putting another, I think,
60
internet type satellites out there. But the news today that we want to talk about is Iridium, who has had satellites in the atmosphere for, well, no, I guess exosphere. I don't know. They've had them up in space for a long time now, and they've been repurposed. There are 66 satellites up there. They have announced today Iridium Cloud Connect for IoT is actively serving customers. They work with AWS, IoT and cloud services, and cover, so they say, the more than 80% of the Earth that lacks terrestrial coverage.
Got it. There's a lot of Earth that is covered by water, weird mountain places, not a lot of cellular networks. Speaking of cellular, Verizon has signed a deal with Honeywell for the smart grid. Verizon's LTE network will be embedded in modules inside Honeywell's electricity meters and other utility gear. This is important because this is going to hopefully, and I say hopefully because there's a lot that needs to happen here, especially at the utilities level, but it will allow for a little bit more granularity for demand response. Honeywell's talking about being able to incorporate artificial intelligence and machine learning into the smart meters. I would be very curious if that's just marketing speak, because later on in the press release, they also throw in 5G. To be clear, they are experimenting with 5G going forward, but the current deal is for an LTE, so a 4G network. This is not 5G in your smart meters right now, but I'm actually really excited about this and can't wait to see where this goes. And this is Honeywell, not Resideo with the Honeywell brand for the smart home. So, okay, Kevin, let's do a quick thing on a ring, but a different kind of ring.
A different kind of ring, yes. This is the circular ring, which actually makes sense. It's a Kickstarter project going on now. It's already gone well beyond its goal for pledges. Early bird specials are about $200. And this very much reminds me of the Motiv ring.
Yeah,
which was
the Motiv ring. It's MOTIV, or the Oura ring, OURA.
Yeah, the difference here, according to the project, is that you have interchangeable shells for this ring, so you can make it look any color you want. There's different titanium bands that go around it. Built-in data storage, which I don't think is really new. Sensors such as a 3-axis accelerometer, an IR heart rate sensor. What they're focusing on in terms of a difference here is pairing it with I'll call it an AI or an insight app. They're calling that platform Kira. And Kira will take a look at your 24/7 activity tracking, your sleep habits, and she will make actionable recommendations based on the data that's been collected here. So that's something we'd like to see more of in products, as opposed to, hey, you slept for 7 hours or you slept poorly last night. Okay, what can I do about it? And maybe can you tell me when I should go to bed, and so on. That's kind of what this promises. Additionally, there's a small button on this. So you can silence your phone. You can, when you get a notification, you can dismiss it. It will buzz when you get notifications on your phone. So it's connected to a phone as well, with a few more extra bells and whistles. So yes, another ring, but I like the actionable type of information that it provides, the insights.
So you may want to check out the Oura ring, because they do offer a lot of those insights. They offer you bedtime guidance. They offer you recovery optimization efforts. They change your activity goals for you. So very similar. Pretty cool. Okay. I'm tempted by these, but I'm so far not sold. And I don't even wear my wedding ring, so I'd have a hard time with this. Okay. Now it's time for the Internet of Things podcast hotline. This is the part of the show where we take calls from you, our listeners, and hopefully you have questions that we can answer or that we can research and get back to you on. So if you would like to call with your questions, give us a call at 512-623-7424. If you call before January 31st at midnight Eastern, you will be entered to win a Smart Dry sensor, which basically tells you when your clothes are dry in your dryer. It's a very fun device, and I had tried it out, and now it's ready to go on to a lucky winner. And now for this week's question. This week's question is from Joe, and it covers a lot of really good topics. So thanks, Joe, for sending this in.
Hi, Kevin and Stacy. My name's Joe. I just recently bought a home with my significant other, and our current home isn't very smart, but it's mostly because we rent. Seeing as we're moving into a new home very soon, I'm getting excited to hopefully put in some smart light switches and put in smart door locks and a few other things. My concern, and I was just thinking about this now as I was going through and filling up my cart, was that I was doing everything too fast. I'm concerned that the people who are going to be coming in here are going to mess with the automations and they're not going to be able to understand my smart home. Is there a rule of thumb that you guys would recommend as far as what I should be automating first, or the best way to tell my friends and family what's automated? If you have a lot of people coming over and you only live with one person, do you tell your friends when you automate something new, or do you just wait for them to discover it themselves? Thanks.
Okay, Joe. I love this question. I love it because it's polite to think about other people, especially with, everything we've talked about this episode with surveillance, identifiable information, blah, blah. So the first thing I would say to you before you fill up your cart is to talk to your significant other and say, hey, these are the sorts of things that we're going to put in the house or that I want to put in the house. And this is what it's going to allow me to do. You'll have access to this, et cetera, and ask him or her if they're cool with this. Because
with cameras, it gets tricky in particular.
Yeah. So once you have buy-in from the person who lives there with you, I would say things to think about are making sure that they are also an admin on the home as well. So they can add people and remove people, and maybe talk about like how you want to go about that. Like I have a rule that my daughter can only put her friends on her guest network. She cannot put them on her normal network at all. And it's a just hard and fast rule.
I don't even get on your regular network. I'm a guest.
Yeah, no one gets on the network. But think about things like that, adding people to like your door lock, for example. And then the other thing I would say is think about products that work regardless. And like with a smart bulb, those are terrible when you've got a dumb light switch, right? Because when you turn off the light switch, the smart bulb breaks. So I would say invest in smart light switches. Or if you're going to do smart bulbs, then because you're afraid of like connecting light switches or the electricity kind of thing, then put switches on like the Philips Hue button or maybe the Lutron Aura for the Philips Hue that turns a dumb switch into a smart switch so those don't break.
I don't have a lot of guests at my house, but when I have regular guests come over, like certain neighbors that come here once, twice a week, I actually do tell them we've got cameras in the house. Somebody who's showing up once in a while, I'm sorry, I probably should ask everybody for consent, but I don't. So I let them know, I show them where they are. I'm like, just so you know, and I explain to them, it's not recording now. I don't have them on all the time. Generally have them on when we're not at home and or automatically when we go to sleep till we wake up, just so they're cool with it. And actually that generally spurs other conversations and gets them interested into the other devices, with the lights and so on. The other bit that I would mention, and Stacey, you had said, talk to your significant other. I totally agree with that. I work with my household members when I set things up so that they understand how to use them, what the names are. And I try and make it as simple for them as possible so they don't have to remember names. So I often group my lights to a certain smart digital assistant. So that way in the family room, for example, all they have to do is say OKG or whatever, lights off. They don't have to know the name of the lights. They're just grouped with that particular microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good tip. I would also say for more complicated things, like especially if you have people who like pet sitters come over, if you're using Madam A, which is what we call the Amazon Echo's digital assistant, if you're using that, they have blueprints. So they're Madam A blueprints or Madam A skill blueprints There's one that you can do where you just have custom answers to questions. And I set up one of those for things like in the end result was I told my guests, I was like, you can ask Madam A, you can say, Madam A, how do I turn on the television? And she will give you the command. And that's one way to, it only takes a few minutes to set one of those up.
It's like an instruction manual for your guests. That's easy for them to use.
Yeah. And your smart stuff should never break the way things are supposed to work, right? So you can always use the remotes to turn on my television. But because I have a Logitech Harmony, for example, that talks to Google or Madam A, you can also just say, hey, so-and-so, turn on the television. And everything will happen in the right order. And that's nice. But you can also do it the other way. In the same way with lights, the same way with door locks. You know, I like a keypad door lock precisely because I want it to be manual for people if they want it manual. So just think about like when this fails, how does this fail? What does the user expect it to do? Does it fail back to what they expect? And then once you have consent, you've got all this and you've spent your money.
Fill that cart.
Yeah, fill that cart, man. Have fun, Joe. All right. If you would like to call us and ask your question and be entered to win, give us a call, 512-623-7424. All right. That concludes this part of the IoT podcast. Please stay tuned for our guest, Dan Breidelman of KB Homes, talking about what they're building into new homes and where he expects the trends to go. But first, a message from our sponsor. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is MachineQ, a Comcast service, and I have Michael Putterman here with me from MachineQ. Michael, just to get started, can you remind us what is MachineQ?
MachineQ is a Comcast service, and we help enterprises connect their operations through an integrated product suite of devices, gateways, and IoT management software. We provide two primary products today. Our infrastructure product includes a suite of IoT gateways, APIs, and our device and gateway management experience, MQ Central. Our platform product is a portfolio of low-power sensing devices that can be layered on top of our infrastructure product.
And can you tell us about where MachineQ is going? What's coming down the road as we head into 2020?
A lot of customers have been really happy with our infrastructure and platform products. But one thing we're finding is that there is a group of customers that really want to buy solutions from MachineQ. So as we go into 2020, we will begin investing in full stack solutions that we can offer to our customers with a focus on temperature monitoring and asset tracking.
And what is an example of what this could mean for enterprises?
What this means for our enterprise customers is that they can work with MachineQ to provide a truly integrated full-stack solution experience. A recent example of this is that we worked with a Fortune 500 biotechnology company who was really interested in an indoor asset tracking solution to track expensive medical equipment throughout their laboratories. By working with MachineQ, we were able to deploy for them a hybrid LoRaWAN and Bluetooth asset tracking solution that helped solve their need. The solution provided the customer with near real-time, room-level information as to where an asset resided in their facilities, and this helped them avoid costly write-offs due to not being able to find expensive assets in their facilities.
That sounds cool, and asset tracking is a really big use case. What other problems was MachineQ able to solve for this particular customer?
For this particular customer, we also provided a variety of solutions to address some facility management challenges that the customer had. We provided temperature sensors for the monitoring of refrigerators and freezers, provided amperage clamps for energy monitoring, and water leak detectors to make sure that there weren't any costly leaks throughout their facilities. Additionally, we were also able to provide all of the software backend and frontend to bring all this information together into a comprehensive visualization and management platform for this customer.
Thanks, Michael, for sharing that. It does sound like you guys are really working hard to provide a fully realized solution for your clients. So where can our listeners find out more about MachineQ?
Our listeners can find out more at machineq.com/Stacey. That's machineq.com/STACEY.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Dan Breidelman, who is the Senior Vice President of Sustainability, Technology, and Strategic Sourcing at KB Home. Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Delighted that you have me on today. It's great.
Well, I am excited because, new homes are our chance to get smart homes in existence, and it's always fun to see how people are thinking about them. But first, before we get into all of that, we should tell people a little bit about KB Home. I'm from Texas, so I know you guys really well, but tell everybody else what it is that you guys do and what makes you different from other home builders.
All right. Well, at KB Home, we're a very unique home builder, and we give people the ability to pick and choose their home and make it unique to them.
Sounds awesome. So let me ask you the big question. How many people come into KB Home and maybe a model home or looking at the floor plans and they say, by golly, we want this home to be smart? Is that the way this interaction goes?
I think it varies, Stacy. I think that, there's so many things that go into your decision about buying a home and making a home. And I clearly think that having access to smart technology is a piece of it. But a lot of it still comes back to some of the basic things about, am I in the right location, the right spot? Can I afford this? And do I get to have choice? And then at the end, oh my gosh, look at all these options I get to pick and choose and make this house unique. And clearly smart, I say in the last 5 years, and I use smart, I'm going to put closer on smart, but being able to personalize what you need is gaining a lot more momentum than it ever has.
Okay. And I think you guys said that last year you saw an uptick of 44% interest in smart appliance selections. And you also saw that people were interested in smart security. Can you talk about what you offer consumers today on the quote unquote smart side and what they're taking up?
Yeah, I would say that smart appliances has clearly taken off. But I think if you even step back further from there, I think people have an expectation of being able to pick and choose. And appliances have taken off. Also, security systems have taken off. And it is unique to what you want as a person. But I would say things, too, like just some fundamentals. Like there are things that maybe 5 years ago you thought were maybe unique. For example, most people want to have a smart thermostat. A lot of people have converted to having a smart doorbell and then the ability to control light and sounds and make it unique. So I would say that in those categories across the board, you see a lot more interest in how can I pick and choose what's unique for me. It's really not maybe one size fits all, but it's a combination of things that make it unique for what you want.
Do you guys choose partners in this space? Like if I want to get a connected thermostat, for example, am I looking at a Nest and a Honeywell, or am I looking at, only one brand? Like how do you guys choose what products you're going to offer the consumer?
If you're in an existing home and you've got technology in that home, for example, you have an old style thermostat and you have something that you want to add on, it's an add-on to your house. You replace the thermostat with a Nest, or you put something inside of a plug and you make it smart. Being a home builder, you have an opportunity to integrate, smart technology in places that you don't see behind the walls. So like for smart thermostats, we've had a 20-year relationship with Carrier. We'll use a smart thermostat that comes with Carrier. It's called the Carrier Core Thermostat, and you have an opportunity to use that. So I'd say we connected up with technologies that we know are tried, true, and that just work.
So in this case, I can only get a Carrier if I'm building with you, or?
Yeah, in this case, the smart thermostat just comes standard with the house. So the fact that you've just bought a KB Home, you've got a standard smart thermostat. You don't even have to worry about, do I need to go buy something else or get a choice? What you do have a choice is you can actually get the basic one, or you can move it up the value chain. You can pick a more complex one that does more features, that manages other parts of the house. I want a smart thermostat that might give me room-to-room, HVAC capabilities. So the nice thing is that you get a basic smart thermostat, and then you can build it up from there.
And wait, I realized we are putting the cart before the horse by talking about all these devices, because probably a couple years ago, the Wi-Fi Alliance introduced this kind of concept of a Wi-Fi smart, where the Wi-Fi was optimized to work throughout the entire home. And I believe at the time I talked to Lennar, which is another home builder, about how they were trying to make Wi-Fi a part of the home. They were also installing some basic smart devices as well. Let's go within the walls first to the basic home infrastructure. What does the smart home need, in your opinion, in terms of basic infrastructure?
That's a really, really, really good question. And there will probably be 27 different opinions on what that is, because sometimes making your home smart, a consumer may want to have some choice, because you first of all have to start with bandwidth to the home. and who your carrier for bandwidth to the house is. And sometimes people want to have a choice there. So for me, fundamentally, the most important thing as we go into the future and talk about home bandwidth and smart technologies is that having an internet-ready home with the right bandwidth is fundamentally probably your first thing. And with a new home, you can have all of the technology set up to make that hookup very, very easy. With the advent of wireless technology, with mesh technology these days, the idea of having to run cables and copper and fiber through your home is a huge chunk of money. And with mesh technologies, having wires to your house is probably not the best way to do your investment because, wireless technology is changing at almost the speed of light. And so having a infrastructure that's, going to be outdated in 2 years is probably not the right way. And I'm a big advocate of, I don't think that the future of getting your home Wi-Fi ready should be, wired access ports and ceilings. I think it's more of having an infinite loop with a mesh system that you can continually enhance as technology gets better.
Okay, so now that we've got infrastructure, we've talked a little bit about some of the devices that are possibly in the home. Let's dig into the experience for the consumer. So if I'm walking into the KB model home and I'm saying, hey, I want these smart appliances. I really want, sensors or a connected security system. I want your fanciest thermostat. How does the setup process go? Where does that begin and end?
There's different classes of what people would like to have. And I think the unique thing about being at KB is that if you came into a community and you walked into one of our model parks, we probably have 3 or 4 different model homes that are set up. And each one of those models might have a different, let's just say a different layer of smart in the home. So you could get a little bit of an idea of what you'd want to have. Like we might have a super user smart home where as you come up to the front door and it's a smart front door lock, meaning that the sales technician may have already preset her face to be recognized by the door. The AI recognizes your face, recognizes it's you, unlocks the door, and you walk in. And if you went the sound route, it would just say "Welcome home," and I've set the settings to 5 p.m. that you'd like, and the lights get set, the music comes on, and the home is very smart and adapts and works with you. On the other end, you may not want to have that kind of technology, but you want to have a door that you walk into with a smart doorbell where you can have an app and you can turn your lights on manually. So we'd like to demonstrate both, like what fits your needs as you walk through that house and it makes it unique to you. Because realistically, Stacy, there's a lot of add-ons that you can make it so that it responds back to what is unique to what a customer might want to have in a house. You have appliances, you have lights, you have smart plugs, you can have circadian rhythm lighting that comes on and off and matches with the rise and the fall of the sun to set your mood right for the day, and music that comes on to help get you in the right mode. So there are a lot of ways to make that house work for you.
Yes. Now, let's pretend that I've lived in this house for 8 months and now I'm going to have a baby and suddenly my circadian rhythms are all off. Maybe I want different personalizations. When I want to do that, do I come back to KB Home? Am I on my own? Can I buy something? It feels, in a smart home, it feels almost cruel to say, I am giving you a smart home. Take it and be gone for me forever.
This is true, and this is the cruelest part of it is that you change, your house changes, your needs changes, right? 5 years ago, the problem was bigger because you had to kind of solve how do I communicate with all these smart devices in my house, and how do I make it unique, and how does it change with me as I grow? And it seems like it's overwhelming. You can't really deliver a house to consumers and say, oh, here's your house, and now here's 500 apps that you have to put a password in and to run your house. I think with the advent of things like the Apple Smart Kit or Amazon, or what I'm going to call our integrator technologies, if you look at most smart devices these days, it will integrate with 2 or 3 different platforms, the ones that you like, that allow you to be able to add and change as you go through time. But if you're not like that, so like, for example, we've partnered with Dish. As you've made your selections and you move into your home, a white glove service where after you moved in, Dish comes to your house and they see all the technology you bought in the studio and they say, okay, let's get your smart home to work the way you want. And now you can have a relationship with Dish throughout the life cycle of your house, where either they've trained you on how to do it and it's relatively easy, or they can come back and they can help you with add-ons or changes as you have the life cycle through your home. So there's ways to make it easy, and there's ways to make it so that it's simple for a customer to use.
Let's talk a little bit more about the infrastructure of the home, less so on the broadband side and wireless side. But let's talk about really interesting things like, I know that at CES, I saw a lot of connected bathroom appliances, many of which require me to have electricity near my shower. Historically, that has not been something you would do as a home builder. Another thing that I personally would like is way deeper switch boxes for my light switches, because smart switches are a little bit fatter, and trying to cram 4 smart switches behind a 4-gang, box is really difficult. So talk to me about any of the changes that you guys are making in terms of designing and building houses for this type of technology, if any. Maybe you're just like, it's not such a big deal.
You hit it on the head. The cool thing about being a home builder is that if you think about digital versus analog, and you think about the way a home just used to be built, a plug, a light socket, places that you would plug speakers into, were all pretty much analog, and they weren't very smart. But what you're seeing today is you're seeing more and more that the boxes that we buy, the switches that we buy, the componentry that we're going to buy, that the prices are getting equal to that of a non-smart switch. So that a builder has an opportunity to put things in the infrastructure that allow for all those switches to be smart and protected, so that you're able to do things like what you just said in the bathroom. And like we work with Kohler and work with Moen. Moen allows consumers and a couple of their products to basically, if you've seen them, you can turn it on with your voice, or you can turn it on with touch, control the temperature if you want with Siri, with Google, with Alexa, and then it can also be controlled through your smartphone. So I think you're going to see a lot more in that. But what made that connection easy was that instead of having to buy, I don't know if you've ever gone into like a Lowe's or a Best Buy and you've bought a smart plug that just plugs into your plug, or you've bought a smart light bulb that you can control. The idea is that in the future, I think, using IoT devices, you start to create sensors and make that seamless for the consumer for today if they want it, and in the future. Light switches are kind of unique, aren't they? Because in today's mode, a light switch usually meant I have a wire there. But if you think about it today, most digital switches that can talk to a wireless system doesn't have to have a wire to it. Matter of fact, it doesn't really need to have a switch, but most people like a switch. And you just mentioned to me, what if something changes in my life? What if I'm a traditional family and we have a child and I want to put the light switch down where the child can turn it on or off? Well, one that's not wired up, that's smart, you simply just can move the switch down to where they can touch it. So those are the kind of things that make things work for you in the future. And, the advent of digital and having that technology kind of starts making the home work for you instead of you working for the house. So, the future's bright for lighting systems and just really redesigning how lighting works. Not everybody's going to carry their smartphone around and light every light. So you might want to have a place on the wall that you touch because your smartphone's not with you, but it does not have to be a traditional light switch. It can be an electronic switch that can go anywhere.
That is interesting.
Yeah, just say turn on. If you like having voice, and maybe not everybody wants to have voice, but if you like having voice and you do happen to have your phone and you are using, say, an Apple, you can just say, "Hey Siri, turn on the light in the baby's room," and the light will go on. So I think that how those things get designed, it takes a completely different mix here in the future. And I think that's what's the most exciting, is that the changes we're going to see will become sort of second nature to us instead of like a traditional look and feel.
Interesting. That'll save you a lot on copper wiring, too.
You hit on a very good point, too, because technology costs something, right? And you're trying to make everything still affordable. So as you invent in digital technology that makes your life easier, there should be an offset in cost so that it's not a plus up. So my view is that technology should be an enabler for us to also look at how do you get people that technology, but at the same time, through innovative engineering practices, eliminate some costs to make that a net so that people can have this and you're not changing the cost of the house. With a new home, you have an opportunity to design it in, right? A lot of people would say, Stacy, that the best way to avoid a cost is to engineer it in the first place instead of adding it on after the fact.
to be clear, I should not expect to go out and buy a new house tomorrow that does not have wiring for the lights, correct?
No, I wouldn't think so yet. Certainly at KB Home, I think that in the studio, you could actually ask for that and you can get a lighting control system that would do that. But it wouldn't be something you put as standard because you still want to make it up to the person's choice. But I would say, if you just think about it, the iPhone's been here since 2008, right? This is 2020, 12 years. Think of how much we've advanced in just 12 years with what to expect. You could have that same change of innovation pace with what you'd expect to have in your house too.
Okay. And what kind of technology are you excited about for the home?
I tell you what I'm really excited about from tech is wellness in a house. And I think that's probably a completely different half an hour topic. But if you think about just how using technology can improve the health and wellness of you living in your home, and I'll just give you a couple of tidbits on that. And I'm thinking about how you manage the quality of the air while you live in your home, how you manage the lightings to match up with your circadian rhythms, how you can make sure that water that you're using and how sustainable this is key. And I'm really excited about the future around how we make that house work for you from a wellness perspective. So I think that's exciting, and I'm looking forward to doing some things in the future with that. We're partnering with some folks to do some really cool stuff in that area. So I think that's kind of the next frontier.
I look forward to seeing this sort of vision play out. Thank you for coming on the show this week.
Well, I can't tell you how delighted I was to be on it, and I'm very proud of what we've done here, and I'm just glad we had a chance to talk.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.